I spent a month fighting in Bakhmut. I helped 25 wounded soldiers in that time. It was scary. Nothing was clear to us. I had a thermal imager and my partner had a machine gun. That's how we worked. To me, it was like a battle in hell between good and evil. The Russians had a lot of artillery, and barrels of all calibers and plenty of ammunition, despite Prigozhin's statements about the lack of ammunition for his artillery. The whole city was destroyed. All big houses were broken and rubble. Not a single surviving apartment. No one is ever safe. Not completely. Welcome back to B&B War Stories. I'm your host, Nick Laidlaw. What you are about to listen to are separate interview questions that I gave to a Ukrainian medic who fought in the Battle of Bakhmut. He fought in the city for 2 different rotations for his unit. His experiences there are very extensive, and all the footage you're about to see, he filmed himself. So let's just dive right into it. I spent a month fighting in Bakhmut. I helped 25 wounded soldiers in that time. There were 7 of them on the first day of combat duty. There were days with 2 to 3 wounded to treat. One day, it was 5. I always had 2 backpacks with me. In one pack, thermal imagers, cartridges, mobile power banks, and everything necessary. In the other pack, only medicine and medical supplies. I made sure to take so much that I had enough to share it with the other medics who lost their backpacks during local retreats. Because enemy breakthroughs, though slow, were always happening. Not everything could be saved from the positions, and stuff was left behind. We arrived late at night. It was completely dark. A large number of people from different divisions came to us on armored vehicles. Everyone in my unit got mixed up with other units also entering the city at the same time. We were laden with equipment, ammunition, weapons, and it was dark. It was scary. Nothing was clear to us. Not even our exact positions. It seemed that the Russians might be around. The multi-story building across the street was on fire. This means that it was recently hit by a mortar or something else. We somehow managed to find everyone in our unit, plus or minus. But we did not understand where to go, and we didn't know who knew where we were supposed to go. After some time, an officer came for us and took us to the checkpoint. The first time I saw an enemy soldier was in a thermal imager. I felt a strong adrenaline rush, but I was not lost mentally. The experience didn't prevent me from thinking clearly. My body trembled a little, but I was very focused and very attentive. I had a thermal imager and my partner had a machine gun. That's how we worked. He shot, and I watched and adjusted his fire based upon impact on the walls and the ground. Sometimes we switched positions and changed roles, but we did not allow the orcs to advance anywhere for a long time. As a content creator, my online presence is everything. It's how I connect with you guys, and it's how I'm trying to make a living. So when I recently did a search for my name and email address, I was shocked to see that data brokers had my personal information up for sale. It made me feel really uncomfortable knowing that if someone got their hands on this information, they could potentially access all of my online accounts and put my entire career at risk. I can't afford to have everything ruined because of some data breach. Unfortunately, these data leaks are putting us all at risk. Did you know that AT&T recently revealed that over 73 million customer records were released on the dark web? That's both current and former customers. They recommend using strong passwords, monitoring account activity, and considering credit freezes or fraud alerts from credit bureaus. But who has time for all that? That's why I've been using Aura, the sponsor of today's video. Aura does all of this for me. It shows me which data brokers are selling my information and automatically submits opt-out requests on my behalf. Plus, with their identity theft insurance, I know I'm covered if anything does happen. And the best part, I don't have to download a bunch of different apps just because a company couldn't keep my data secure. Aura is always on and always doing the hard work of keeping me safe. Look, I'm not leaving myself, my family, and my career vulnerable to data breaches. And if you don't want to either, you can go to aura.com/battlesandbeers and try your first 2 weeks for free. Also linked below in the description. My first wounded man was very lucky. A 7.62 sniper bullet hit this boy while he was in the support by fire position. He was hit in the mouth, in the cheek, and the bullet tore his ear. I just wrapped his face and his ear so he could see and was quickly evacuated. It was around 6 in the morning when this happened. We went on combat duty about a half an hour later. In 15 minutes, 2 more of my comrades would be injured. To me, it was like a battle in hell between good and evil. It sounds cliché, but that's exactly how I felt. Like Constantine, or Dante in the Inferno. Everything around me was burning, smoking, everything was falling apart, banging, breaking, shooting, exploding. It was sometimes quiet, at night, but not for long periods of time. The whole city was destroyed. All big houses were broken and rubble. Not a single surviving apartment. Urban battles are not at all like field battles. In the city, it is more difficult, but more interesting. There are more options for maneuver and places to hide. The battle is made difficult by fear and physical exhaustion due to the several times greater number of enemy soldiers who climb and crawl at us all day and all night from all sides. But if our soldiers were better trained and had good psychological preparation, the Russians could be beaten in packs by small units, which they were. It was their numbers that overwhelmed us in the end. The worst part about my experience in Bakhmut was losing my brothers in arms. Their deaths. Because in Bakhmut, only the best of us left life on this earth. One soldier had a shell fragment in his penis. The shrapnel piece flew directly under the head from the underside of the shaft. He immediately ran indoors, lay face up, took off his pants and underpants and shouted, "What's there? What's there? Someone help me. Treat me." I put on disposable gloves and examined him. Well, I look and I see there is nothing seriously wrong. I reassure him that he will be fine for the wedding night. They laughed. He said that a week before this, another piece of shrapnel also flew into his scrotum. Bad luck for that guy. We wrapped his member tightly with a hemostat bandage to his body. I gave him some painkillers, and he continued to lie down on the floor laughing, waiting for evacuation. The Russians had a lot of artillery, and barrels of all calibers and plenty of ammunition, despite Prigozhin's statements about the lack of ammunition for his artillery. Basically, their artillery fired whenever they wanted. Everything flew everywhere in a row. It seems to me that they did not hit anywhere specifically. Their task is simply to erase the city. So they did. Unfortunately, they fired so much during the day that the sheer volume of fire inevitably hit a lot of our soldiers. Most of the Ukrainian losses were caused by artillery. Do not neglect to wear protection such as a bulletproof vest and a helmet. When you hear the firing off in the distance, remember to bend down when you move or are stationary. You will become smaller and harder to hit. When the shell falls close, run to the basement as soon as you can. When you are on duty in a house with several floors, do not climb above the second floor. Artillery will be able to hit you directly. It is better to be behind 2 walls from the side of the enemy. The bathrooms on the interior are good for this. Over time, you will learn to distinguish the nature of artillery, departures, and arrivals, and learn how to survive. But no one is ever safe. Not completely. Yes, on my second trip to Bakhmut, we took up positions in a house, and literally across the street was a high-rise building that was already under Russian control. The distance between us and them was about 50 meters. They started occupying the next high-rise building from their side that same morning. I saw them transferring things from the basement to the first floor, and I just fired at them as often as I could see them. Later, the boys in my unit also became more attentive to the movement of the enemy and where they were on duty. They also shot those who tried to run from one house to another. This night was also fun. They ran here and there in large groups. I shot them all night because this time I already had a thermal sight mounted directly on the machine gun. It was very easy shooting that night. If there was laughter, then, most likely, it was hysterical, filled with a sense of complete hopelessness and gratitude that one is still alive. A fragment in the penis is also funny, you know. My worst memory is when I treated a guy with a hole in his side. The hole is so big that my hand fit inside the hole completely. This is an unpleasant feeling. He was evacuated, but from his wound, I already knew he would not survive. I thank God every day that I did not have to see or treat guys with limbs that were torn off. This is another level of bodily horror. I remember how the guys from my unit held an important house for a very long time, even when it was fully lit on fire and being attacked constantly. They left only when there were no bricks left of the house. That's all there is to say about that. I also remember how, in the middle of the night, several soldiers ran to help pull out my company member with a broken leg. There was a high risk of encountering the enemy at very close range, but they went and got him, and I gave him first aid. I thought this was quite brave. The reconnaissance commander with us took custody of an abandoned and absolutely beautiful shepherd dog. She was very scared and afraid to be alone at all. We kept her with us and kept her safe. The enemy would run in a group at night to occupy new positions. While they run into a building, you shoot and try to get as many as you could. Then, part of the group that survived goes back to take the wounded, and you shoot again. And in an hour, a new fresh group comes in, which you also shoot. This tactic worked because of their huge numbers. In Bakhmut, the Russians used it successfully. They take numbers and do not count people. Many of these groups were sent just to draw our fire and expend our resources. Human lives as literal fodder. The most common injury is a shrapnel wound to the arm or the leg, of light to moderate severity. Most wounded will survive. I wrapped up and treated a total of 25 wounded soldiers in Bakhmut. It was the most extreme and adrenaline-filled trip of my life. There are many memories. Maybe it's even better to forget some of the things I saw and to forget some of the things I did and endured. See, this is a hard question. I see that it is difficult for most of my civilian acquaintances to communicate with me now. They do not know what happened, and don't know how to ask about what happened there. Have I changed? I became more confident in myself, in my ideas, dreams, and the present. And I became very close to my new girlfriend while I was there. She was waiting for me and was very worried. Well, also, I have changed physically as well. My right ear is always ringing. Not a pleasant feeling. But I also suffered a lot psychologically. Dreams about war, images of severed limbs, post-traumatic stress syndrome. All this has to be worked on with a psychotherapist. I feel pride in this battle as a whole, because the enemy suffered absolutely terrible losses, many times more than us. This is a testament to our Cossack fighting spirit. I think I still need to rethink and reevaluate a lot of things that happened in Bakhmut. During the battle, the main thing about being a medic is to gather a lot of thoughts and do everything correctly and consistently without forgetting anything, because you have to be quick. Everyone is waiting for you to perform, and every second is important. I can't say that I had something extremely difficult medically to deal with. I was very lucky in Bakhmut that there were no wounded people with limbs torn off. A couple of times, I had to put a splint very quickly on a leg on an open fracture. Both these situations required speed because it was very dangerous. The first time, the evacuation vehicle arrived very quickly and stood there in the street waiting for me to bring the wounded to them. The boys were a little nervous because any vehicle spotted by the Russians was targeted immediately. And another time, I was chasing my company in the middle of the night during the retreat. It was extremely scary that the enemies could overtake us. If I understood the question correctly, I took combat medicine courses twice. The first took place over 4 days. We passed March with Ukrainian instructors in the Dnipro region. And then, in a few months, there were more in Kharkiv. Then, I trained with Trident Defense Initiative for 3 weeks. I like these courses very much because they were conducted by instructors from NATO. They provided very good training. We are on good, friendly terms. The most common types of injuries are small fragments somewhere in the arm or leg. There are also lots of bullet wounds. But both kinds of wounds are usually stabilized with a tourniquet. Then a hemostatic bandage is applied to the wound, which is wrapped with an Israeli bandage or an ordinary bandage. Sometimes the wound needs to be tamponed or stuffed a little. Then the injured person whom I tamponed for the first time in my life had a punctured side in the area of his left kidney, a very big wound. Half of my hand fit in it. After that, tamponing did not seem difficult anymore. I tried to be positive when injuries happened, and I tried to energize the patients with that positivity. I tried to speak words of support, saying that you have to be patient a little more now, so that it will be better later. Perhaps my acting education also played a role in here, because sometimes I did it without being energetically charged internally. Regarding the situation during the battle, well, what do? You accept the rules of the game. You concentrate not on what is dangerous, but on what you need to do to help the person. In fact, you have to control everything. As JD, the instructor, said, a combat medic is a soldier who is a little smarter than everyone else. If you mean the distribution of medical supplies, I had plenty of everything. Plus, I was constantly collecting additional medicine at our abandoned positions and even just at home. If we are talking about the distribution of resources among all the wounded, then once, after a tank attack, we had several 200, and several heavy 300, and several medium ones. It was necessary to choose who should be helped first. I saw that the average ones were more or less stable, and they were already being helped. So I dragged a seriously injured person with a hole in his side and other fragmentary wounds in various parts of the body. And my partner, who is not a medic at all, began to examine another seriously injured person, and I just tried to control his actions with my words and help my patient at the same time. Regarding the dynamics of the battle, I will say that in urban battles, you should try not to climb above the second floor. Otherwise, there is a great risk of being hit by enemy artillery. The second conclusion is that you should not be afraid to fight. If you don't fight, you will definitely be beaten. On the other hand, people also want to live and have fear. It must be understood that a middle ground must be reached for your own survival. Regarding medicine, I concluded that there is no such thing as too few bandages. I cannot remember such a moment. I was more afraid of being injured, of becoming disabled, or fear if someone doesn't survive because of my mistake as a medic. I was a little nervous the day we left Bakhmut. I was afraid that something bad might happen to me on my very last day. I was a little affected by this anxiety. Come all this way, just not to make it on the very last day. I think about half the unit came out intact. About 2/3 of the second half were injured. The remaining were 200 or no news. If you found value in that interview, please consider subscribing to my Patreon account or joining my Discord channel. I'd love to be able to do war reporting full-time, and that's a great way to help me do it. In addition, I will be returning to Ukraine this October. If you would like to support my mission to document stories from the front line, supporting me through those two avenues is one of the best ways you can do it. As always, every soldier has a story, and every single story deserves to be told. Thanks for watching.